Hey, welcome back. Before we get into this one, I just want to say, what you're about to hear is the kind of story that makes you rethink what real power actually looks like. Stay till the end. Trust me, it's worth it. And if you're new here, hit subscribe. There's a kind of quiet in a med device plant when the lines are running and nobody's yelling. Just the soft clack of carts and the smell of alcohol wipes and printer toner. I liked that quiet. It meant the system was holding. I'm Tobin Kessler, 57 years old. I live in Lowell, Massachusetts, and I'm an independent consultant. Not staff, not management, not anybody's guy. For 13 years, I've been the one making sure their quality paperwork doesn't end up in an FDA recall report. Traceability matrix, batch release packets, audit trails, the bones of the system. When those break, product stops moving. Or worse, it moves when it shouldn't. My office was just a metal desk in a dead corner near the quality archive room, surrounded by locked cabinets. The crown jewel was a row of binders labeled 2013, Do Not Rebuild. They looked boring, until someone needed to prove why a decision was made 13 years ago. Then they became gold. That archive? I built it. Back when they were pushing too fast during a bad expansion, the paperwork almost got out of sync with the parts. Almost. I kept the originals, the red lines, the approvals, and the why notes. Those notes were the difference between corrective action and cease distribution. Quick note. Before listening, share which city or country you're watching from. And let's continue. Dale Hargrove, the quality head, had a nervous habit of rubbing his jaw when stressed. He didn't like conflict, but he respected proof. We had a rhythm. He calmed the floor. I handled the paper. Janelle Price from HR. She kept everything neat and polite, documented like a machine, but you could tell she hated confrontation. She held her coffee like it was body armor. Then there was Mavis Crowley in finance. Tall, calm, terrifying. She didn't ask for your opinion, just the number. If it didn't add up, she found out why. Nolan Pierce, young analyst, sharp eyes. He noticed tiny things, half pallets missing tags, signatures out of sequence. He'd show up with a spreadsheet and a forehead wrinkle that said, "Something's off." Hank Dobson ran security like it was his second spine. Quiet, steady, fair. When someone didn't belong, Hank noticed. And when someone did belong but still caused trouble, Hank noticed that too. Last was Gus Malley, the janitor for our wing. Never said much, but he kept that archive corridor clean enough to eat off. He'd nod at me like we were both doing invisible work that only mattered when it failed. That was the cast, the ones who kept the place from falling apart. We didn't hang out, we weren't friends, but we had a system. A quiet one, and it held. Until she showed up. She showed up in the Monday morning huddle like she already owned the place. Marla Langston, VP of Operations, private equity's favorite fixer. 39, cold eyes, tighter suit, and the kind of smile you only see before bad news. She didn't shake hands. She pointed at charts. She didn't ask questions. She listed what she planned to eliminate. Redundancy, delay, and old-school thinking. That last one was aimed straight at me, even if she didn't say my name. On day 2, she came through quality. Her heels clicked like a timer, fast and sharp. She stopped at my traceability board, squinted at the color-coded tags, and said, "What is this, sticky notes for scared people?" Dale gave a weak chuckle, trying to keep it light. I didn't. I just watched how she looked at the locked cabinets behind me, like they'd insulted her personally. She turned to the group, 3 line supervisors standing nearby, and asked, "Why are we still printing paper packets? Why isn't batch release one click?" I told her, calm as anything, because medical devices don't ship on vibes, they ship on documented evidence. Paper's not the problem, gaps are. She didn't respond. She just made a note on her phone like she was logging who needed to be replaced first. That's when the invites started. Not invites, commands. Mandatory ops alignment, 7:10 a.m. Daily stand-up, attendance required. I bill by deliverable, not by pep talk. My contract spells it out. Every meeting costs money, unless it's project tied. I declined the first two, professionally. I didn't grandstand. I clicked no, then sent Dale my weekly scope update like I always did. 10 minutes later, she was standing at my desk. Vendors don't get to pick and choose, she said, loud enough for Nolan to freeze mid-walk nearby. I looked up and replied, I'm not a badge wearer. I'm a contracted firm. I don't take marching orders without a work request tied to scope. She smiled like she just bit into something bitter and wanted more. Everyone's replaceable, Tobin. Paper is replaceable. People are replaceable. Then she leaned a little closer and added, I want access to the master originals and admin rights for e-signatures, just for visibility. I kept it polite, but firm. Not without a transition plan. You break the chain of custody, and you can't prove what changed, when, or who touched it. That's how recalls are born. She didn't argue. She just stared, then walked off without saying another word. Later that afternoon, Dale pulled me aside by the vending machines. He rubbed the side of his face like it hurt to say it. She asked me where the keys are, to the cabinets, and why you have them. He didn't tell me to give them up. He didn't say much at all. But I knew that look. It was the look of someone who's already halfway to backing down. That night, I went home and cracked open my contract again. Sat at my kitchen table, slow reading every clause. Termination needed written notice and board-level involvement. Credential transfer required a documented, signed handover. I wasn't paranoid. I just wasn't new. 3 mornings after Marla's speech about everyone being replaceable, I opened my laptop at my desk and saw a new Teams message waiting from her. The timestamp read 8:02 in the morning, early enough that most of the floor was still warming up the lines. It wasn't phrased like a question or even a request. It was written like a command from someone who thought the outcome was already decided. The message said, "Send quality archive access today. Also clear your desk." That was it. No greeting, no meeting request, no conversation. I stared at the screen for a few seconds and felt that cold, mechanical click in my chest, the feeling you get when someone confident is about to make a very expensive mistake. I didn't answer her. I took a screenshot of the message, the timestamp, and the recipient line. Then I saved it to my records folder the same way I save audit evidence. If someone planned to start a fight in writing, the least I could do was preserve the writing. She had copied Janelle from HR and Ronan Henders from legal. That detail told me everything about the play she thought she was running. Either she didn't understand the difference between an outside contractor and an employee, or she understood perfectly and assumed nobody would challenge her. I picked up my phone and called my attorney, Miles Vance. Miles always sounded calm, like a man discussing weather instead of lawsuits. I forwarded him the screenshots from my business email and said, "She's trying to terminate me like I'm hourly labor." Miles gave a short, quiet laugh and answered, "Good, let her keep writing." Miles worked fast. Before lunchtime, he sent Marla a formal notice stating that her message represented an unauthorized termination attempt and an improper demand for controlled documentation. The letter reminded the company that my contract required written board involvement and a documented credential transfer. It was polite, precise, and sharp enough to cut through steel. Marla answered the letter the same afternoon with an email that was barely longer than a shrug. She wrote that the lawyer note was cute and that I would be out by the end of the day. That line told me she still believed authority was the same thing as power. Later, Dale walked over, looking pale and tired. He leaned against my desk and spoke low so the floor couldn't hear. "She's telling leadership you're refusing to cooperate and holding documentation hostage." He didn't accuse me of anything. He was warning me what story was already spreading. I left production alone and kept my hands off the floor. Instead, I opened a blank document and started a running log with times, emails, and names of witnesses. About an hour later, Nolan appeared with a worried look and his laptop open. He showed me a release packet that refused to route for approval because the electronic signature role had suddenly changed. That afternoon, Janelle sent me a careful email asking whether I would voluntarily transition my credentials to what she called the new operations structure. I answered the same way I answer auditors. I told her I would follow the contract and perform a documented handover when proper authorization existed. No emotion, no speeches, just the record written where everyone could see it. I added her message to the log, saved the file, and kept working. That same week, the one where my inbox kept filling with requests that weren't really requests, Gus started avoiding eye contact. He passed me in the hallway and didn't nod like usual. That was the first sign. The second was when he stopped pushing his cart past the exec offices. I noticed because suddenly the quality corridor started collecting crumbs and dust, little things Gus never let sit. A few days later, during shift change, I caught him outside by the rear lot. He was standing by the dumpsters, fiddling with his badge, like it had betrayed him. "I need to tell you something," he said. "It's nothing big. I don't want you thinking I was being disrespectful." He looked down while he spoke, like the words physically hurt. "She yelled at me," he said, "in the hall. Said the cart was squeaky and made the place sound cheap. Then she told me I was in the way and not appropriate for the image." I didn't say anything. I let him finish. "She didn't even ask who I was, just told me to get moving." 2 days after that, his badge stopped working. Facilities called him at home and told him not to come in. They said his services were no longer required. No warning, no write-up, nothing in the system. That same afternoon, Dale showed me a short HR memo from Janelle. It said, "Facilities separation completed," like it was a routine cleaning schedule. Dale's hands shook a little when he passed me the paper. "She didn't even talk to me about it," he said. "It just happened." Later, Hank pulled me aside in the stairwell, said, "You should know. Marla personally called in the badge restriction, told me to list Gus as do not admit." He didn't look angry. He didn't sound dramatic. He just gave me the exact timestamp and walked off. Hank is the kind of man who documents quietly because he knows one day someone's going to need the truth. While that was brewing, Marla rolled in her so-called implementation squad. Corey Dempsey and Beck Ralston, barely 30, maybe younger. Wide-eyed, full of buzzwords, and absolutely not built for regulated work. The kind of guys who confuse file formats with policy. She also brought in Tad Rigo, a slick contractor with no badge and way too much confidence for someone who hadn't been through a single audit. Marla held a meeting and called it a modernization sprint. She said we were switching to a new document platform with standard templates and a file transfer wizard. She said it like templates were magic. I warned her in writing, traceability isn't a PDF layout. It's a sequence of custody. Break that and product goes on hold, or worse. She ignored it. Then she told me, again in writing, to fold the 2013 Do Not Rebuild archive into the new system for consistency. I wrote back, "That archive is the root for legacy batch investigations and old lot controls. If you break the reference, you lose your map. You don't get to rebuild history. You preserve it." That evening, Dale came by with that same twitch in his jaw he always had when the air got too tense. "She told me I can either cooperate," he said, "or be part of the old problem." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The goodwill in that building was gone. She'd burned it herself. The first red flag came from Nolan. He showed up at my corner holding a printout and frowning like someone had switched his coffee with soup. "2 batches stuck in pending," he said. "Traceability to incoming inspections broken. System throws a link error." I took the paper and looked. If you didn't know how the structure worked, you'd think it was just a tech hiccup. But those links? That's the proof the right part got the right test before shipping. If they break, the the whole chain's compromised. 2 hours later, a packaging supervisor showed up at Dale's office holding a stack of incomplete device history records. Missing sign-offs, blank signature fields. That's not a printer jam. That's a compliance issue. You ship a device without full DHR, and you're not just risking a warning letter, you're risking a field recall. And recalls don't care who pressed the button. I tried to stop the slide. I emailed Marla and copied Dale and Ronan. I told them flat out, pause the transfer until we validate mapping logic and approval workflows. It wasn't a demand, it was standard protocol. Any auditor would have nodded in approval. Marla replied with exactly one line. We're not pausing progress for fear. Then she sent out a calendar invite for a same-day cutover meeting. I was tagged as optional. Optional, despite my initials being on half the documents in play. I didn't storm in. I'm not staff. I'm not the hero cowboy type. I stayed at my desk and did the thing that matters later. Documented everything that hit my inbox. Every change request, ticket, or routing error. If it showed up official, I logged it. Around 2:40 p.m., Corey and Beck launched the master transfer. I know because Beck emailed a screenshot to the team, bragging that the process was 92% complete. That screenshot later ended up as evidence, time, date, system name. The transfer hit the legacy archive and stalled. System flagged a conflict in approval history. Beck, not knowing better, asked Marla what to do. Marla, per his own forwarded chat, typed, override, clean slate. That override cracked the backbone. Links across the traceability matrix started failing. Release packets couldn't pull required test reports. The system started spitting out certificates with mismatched product codes because it pulled from the wrong version of the template. The phone calls started hitting an hour later. Customers asking why invoices didn't match received quantities. Finance got dragged in, hard. Mavis didn't call me. She called Dale, then Ronan. Then she appeared at my desk in person, holding her phone like it was a scalpel. We're leaking money, she said. You know why? I handed her a printout and pointed to the item code mismatch. Wrong cert, wrong product ID. System grabbed the wrong base file. Mavis didn't argue. She nodded once and walked straight to legal. Later that day, Hank made a slow loop through the quality hallway. I didn't know the full reason until later, but I found out Marla had pulled him aside and said, remove Tobin from quality if he interferes. Hank never touched me. He didn't say a word. He just stood nearby, steady and visible, making it clear I wasn't being moved. Everyone could see him, including Marla. That presence was enough. I didn't have to raise my voice or call a meeting. I had time, paper, and people watching. That's how you stay clean in a storm, by letting the other side right the mess themselves. The morning after the cutover, the calendar held steady. Investor pre-audit risk call at 9 a.m. It was standard, routine check-in ahead of a scheduled customer compliance visit, but the moment we lost traceability, that routine turned into live ammo. Barrett Wycliffe, the board chair, was dialing in. Graham Sutter, the lead investor, had a seat on the video wall. Those two don't ask twice. They don't like surprises. And they especially don't like excuses. Marla walked into the conference room like she was delivering a polished pitch. Hair perfect, blazer sharp, eyes locked in like this was just another rollout. She opened with a line that made my stomach turn. We're in a modernization sprint, she said, and temporary friction is expected. Dale sat against the wall, stiff and gray like he was trying to blend into it. I didn't go into the room. Ronan had quietly pulled me aside before the meeting and said, be visible, not disruptive. Let the record stand. That's what I did. I took a spot right outside the conference room and opened my laptop. I built a full timeline, tight, clean, sourced. First came the written warning I'd sent, then the override order, then Nolan's first error report, then the packaging block, then the invoice mismatches, each one dated, backed up, and printable. Graham's voice came through the speaker. Is product release integrity intact? Marla didn't even blink. Yes, we have full traceability. At that exact second, Nolan texted me a photo from the floor. 3 pallets tagged hold, DHR miss. In DHR mismatch in bright red marker. I forwarded the image to Dale and Ronan with one sentence. This is current state. I didn't add commentary. I didn't need to. Then I messaged Mavis. How many invoice disputes since cutover? She answered with a number and a face I could practically hear sighing through email. Marla kept spinning. She told the room that the issues were legacy artifacts and implied I was slow walking the transition. Her voice didn't crack. It didn't have to. Her words were aimed at erasing me from the problem entirely. I stayed out of it. No shouting, no hallway theatrics. I emailed Ronan a short formal statement. I have not been authorized to execute changes since Marlo's termination message. All activity is by ops team. A few minutes later, I heard Marla say loud enough for the mic to catch, if Tobin would just hand over the master originals, we'd be done. That one landed hard. She had just admitted she didn't have proper access and pinned the whole failure on me in one sentence. Ronan's voice followed, even and quiet. Marla, is there a validated change plan and documented approval record for this transfer? She hesitated, then dodged. Barrett spoke next. Please produce the audit trail. That sentence landed hard. Nobody spoke for several seconds. I texted Dale. If asked directly, I'll confirm facts only. Dale's reply came back fast. Be ready. That was the moment he stopped shielding her. That reply wasn't just a heads up. It was him stepping out of the blast radius before the detonation. Not even 20 minutes after the investor call ended, Marla scheduled an all-hands in the break area. No time to regroup, no time for people to compare notes, just an emergency pep talk disguised as a campaign speech. She stood in front of the whiteboard like she was about to solve a math problem nobody asked her to solve. Smiling, calm, performed. Like the floor hadn't just watched 3 pallets get yanked for trace mismatches. Some of the recent release friction, she said, came from outdated vendor practices. We're moving away from dependence on outside personalities who operate without alignment. Then she looked straight at me and added, some people don't like change. I stayed still, arms crossed, back against the wall, and let her talk. I found that when someone lies to a room full of people who've seen the truth, silence can hit louder than a speech. Mavis stepped forward first. No fanfare, just numbers. There are 29 disputed invoices totaling over $180,000 in billing. If we don't send corrections by close of business tomorrow, that turns into revenue loss. Marla waved her hand like Mavis had just quoted the weather. We'll manage the adjustments. Mavis didn't budge. Not without validation, you won't. The mismatch started the same day the template system went live. You'll need system logs to undo what your team pushed. Then Nolan spoke. His voice was shaky at first, but it sharpened as he got to the part that mattered. We have 3 pallets on hold, he said. Trace matrix links failed, and the release packets can't pull the DHR reports. Supervisors are refusing to sign off until the data lines up. They're right to do that. That landed harder than any accusation. You don't argue with held product and line operators refusing to gamble with compliance. Marla tried to shift again. She turned to Hank. Security has had to manage disruptions around this process. Hank didn't blink. I was asked to escort Mr. Kessler if he interfered. He did not interfere. That line didn't just pull the wind out of her. It stripped the room of her storyline. Then came Janelle, the quiet one. The one who hated conflict so much she practically shrank in meetings. We received a written instruction to clear Tobin's desk and terminate access. It was logged as a non-employee offboarding. She didn't look at Marla. She didn't look at me. She just said it straight and sat down. Marla's face went tight. Not red, not flustered, just tight. Like a locked jaw behind a glass smile. Then Dale spoke. He didn't yell. He didn't defend anyone. Tobin warned us not to move forward without validation. The override decision came from operations. His voice sounded like someone reading a name at a memorial. Tired, final, uncomfortable, but solid. And then Gus showed up without being present. Nolan put him on the table with one line. Also, Gus was removed without cause. Can someone explain why we're treating good people like they're disposable? That's when the silence shifted. Not awkward, heavy, like the floor finally realized what it had been breathing in for the last 2 weeks. After the meeting, Hank stopped by my desk. He didn't say much. Just so you know, I logged the sequence around Gus's removal. Didn't sit right. The restriction order had a name. It'll be there if someone finally asks. Then he walked off like he'd just placed evidence on my desk and left me to decide when to use it. By mid-morning the next day, Ronan sent me a 6-word email that told me everything I needed to know. Board session. Bring your documentation. Say only what you can prove. That's the kind of language I like. No fluff, no guesswork, just the record. The boardroom had that dry, stale air that always hangs around long tables and high-stakes mistakes. Barrett Wycliffe was on the video wall from D.C., eyebrows like cliffs. Graham Sutter was in the room, seated like a man who already knew how this would end. Ronan stood to the side with 2 neat stacks of folders. Miles Vance sat next to me, posture straight, voice off, looking like a silent weapon. Across from us sat Marla, alone, arms crossed, mouth ready. Graham opened with no build-up. Did you authorize an unvalidated change to the release and traceability process? Marla answered smooth. That decision was within operational discretion. Ronan didn't blink. Do you have the documented change plan? Marla held eye contact. We had alignment meetings. That's not documentation, Ronan said. Then he went quiet again. I slid my folder forward and opened it flat. I didn't editorialize. I didn't explain. I walked them through the timeline like I was reading a map. The warning email, the override message, the first traceability failure, the first held batch, the first customer doc mismatch. Every item came with proof, email chains, screenshots, export logs, timestamps. When I got to the photo Nolan sent of the hold DHR mished pallets, I didn't hold it up for drama. I just passed it across the table. Marla cut in. He's been withholding the master copies to maintain leverage. Miles responded, calm as ever. Per the signed agreement, master originals remain controlled until a documented handover is approved and logged. He followed policy. You didn't. Then Miles looked at her without blinking and asked, if he was essential enough to hold leverage, why did you attempt to terminate him by Teams message? That line landed. Even Ronan raised his eyebrows a little. Mavis walked in with a second folder, no announcement. She laid it in front of Graham. These are payment records tied to the contractor Tad Rigo. The charges were run through a consulting expense line that Marla directly controlled. Graham flipped through the folder like he already knew what was in it. Marla, any prior relationship with Mr. Rigo? No. Mavis didn't argue. She flipped to a page. This is a dinner reimbursement, same restaurant Tad later billed for, same date, weeks before his contract existed. Marla didn't smile anymore. Then Hank's note came into play. Ronan introduced it. Janelle confirmed that Gus's separation file had no performance documentation, no warnings, nothing that would justify what happened. I can confirm the removal order was issued verbally by Marla. I preserved the note, time-stamped. He didn't play the clip. He didn't need to. That's when Barrett's tone changed. We're not talking about internal process anymore. This is conduct. Then he turned to me. What does it take to stabilize this? I answered clean. Written reinstatement of authority, defined scope, and the power to halt unsafe changes before they spread. Graham didn't hesitate. He slid a revised agreement across the table. Hire retainer. Direct line to the board. Full stop signal rights. Ronan passed it to me. I read it. Signed it. No speech. Marla was placed on leave right there in the room. She didn't shout. She didn't storm out. She just looked around like the room had voted without her. The next week was pure cleanup. No headlines, no speeches, just quiet triage. I worked shoulder to shoulder with Dale and 3 others in quality to rebuild broken trace links and get clean release packets out the door. I don't do good job stickers. I do line items and corrected certs. We pulled every affected lot, checked it by hand, reissued what was safe, and flagged anything that wasn't. I kept the pace steady, and Dale followed my lead without saying much. For once, we weren't fighting politics. We were fixing product. Mavis was a machine. She handled the customer finance exposure like she was prepping for trial. Her correction letters were tight, no blame shifting, no fluff. Just hard numbers and deadlines. I watched her chase down over 180,000 in invoice corrections without blinking. Corey and Beck looked like rookies pulled into a war zone. They weren't bad kids, just in over their heads. I didn't throw them under the bus. I already had their messages and timestamps saved, and that was enough leverage. I pulled them aside and said, "Give Ronan everything you touched. No guessing, no fixing, just facts." Beck nodded fast. "We didn't know how deep it went." "Now you do," I said. "Act like it matters." Tad Rigo disappeared the minute someone mentioned contracts. Gone. Badge disabled. No answers. Ronan told me, in passing by the water cooler, his paperwork's sloppy and the approval trail looks guided. That was legal speak for someone cleared the path for him, and it wasn't by accident. Then came Marla's last move. Janelle caught me near the freight doors and said, "She filed a complaint, said you were hostile, unsafe environment." I waited. She did it through the external HR inbox. I had to log it because of protocol. "Do you believe it?" I asked. Janelle shook her head. "No, but I flagged the ticket anyway, just so you'd know." Miles responded like he always did. Quiet, clean, brutal. His reply was 3 paragraphs, fully sourced, with attachments. Hank's security notes, the screenshots, my timeline, direct quotes from the board session. It never turned into a hearing. It just died. A week in, Quentin Marsh showed up as the new VP of Operations. Mid-50s, calm shoes, smart eyes. He didn't talk over people. He walked into my space like someone who didn't want to trip a wire. "I'd like to avoid detonating anything," he said. "Tell me where not to step." That got my respect. I scheduled a short risk session with him and the other execs. Plain English, no bullet points. I explained how traceability isn't about fancy templates or tech. It's about proving you know where everything came from. Quentin took notes. Mavis nodded. That alone meant progress. The internal review came back through Ronan and Mavis. No leaks, no gossip, just a summary packet and a private message. Her vendor practices didn't hold up. She's done, quietly. I didn't celebrate. But every time I passed that clean hallway, the one Gus used to polish like it was sacred ground, I thought about how fast a good man could be erased just for being easy to push. And I wasn't done with that. I called Gus on a Saturday morning and asked if he'd meet me at the diner off Route 9, the one near the old rail station. He said yes without asking why. He showed up in a clean jacket and pressed shirt like he still respected the job that cut him loose. No complaining, no anger. Just sat down, ordered coffee, and waited. After a minute, he looked at me and asked, "Why'd it happen?" I told him the truth I could back up. Marla wanted control. She went after the quietest person first to prove she could. I told him Hank had preserved the hallway footage and that HR logged the separation without performance cause. Gus stared down at his coffee like he was asking it for an answer I didn't have. On Monday, I emailed Ronan and Janelle. No speeches, no appeals, just a formal request to review the separation, reinstate Gus, and correct the personnel record. I attached Hank's time-stamped note and Janelle's original HR memo. Quentin didn't drag it out. He read the request and asked, "What's the cost of reinstatement?" Before I could answer, Mavis did. Back pay, a retention bonus, and a written apology on letterhead. Quentin didn't argue. He just nodded like he'd finally been handed something worth saying yes to. Gus walked back in on a Thursday morning. Hank met him at the front, badge in hand. No security escort, no side looks, just a quiet nod and a walk down the hallway like a man being welcomed, not watched. His badge worked. That alone meant more than any apology ever could. People noticed. Not because we made noise, but because the floor could feel it when something wrong got put right. Later that day, Gus pulled me aside and said, "I don't want anyone getting fired over me." I told him, "This isn't about payback. It's about showing the building what it does and doesn't stand for." Gus didn't smile, but I saw the way he stood a little straighter before heading toward his cart. At the next leadership huddle, Quentin's team pitched a rushed document control shortcut. I used my stop signal clause, said no, clearly and publicly, and explained why in plain language. Risk to release, trace error potential, safer path offered. Nobody argued. That part was new. Dale caught me in the hallway afterward and said, awkward as ever, "Thanks for holding that line." I told him, "I'm not here to win fights. I'm here to make sure shipments stay honest, and people get treated like people." He nodded once and walked off. That was enough. Weeks later, Janelle forwarded me the finalized reinstatement letter with Gus's bonus approval. She added one sentence, "Thank you for making this about more than policy." I saved it right next to the original termination screenshot. The last time I thought about Marlo was during a training. Slide said, "Everyone is replaceable." It was labeled as an example of what not to say. Nobody said her name. They didn't need to. The system remembered. I did too. So what would you do in Tobin's shoes the moment Marla gave that first command? Stay quiet, document everything, and let the record speak. Or confront her on the spot. Drop your answer in the comments. Tap hype if you've got it to help this reach more people. And don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Even good story helps.